"Don't get in that car, sir." The words were barely a whisper, but they stopped Cormac Pruitt at the edge of the stone steps that led down from his front door. He had been mid-stride, briefcase in hand, phone already showing the morning's first email, his mind already 15 miles ahead at the firm on K Street. He was 64 years old and had been walking to his car the same way at the same hour on every workday for the past 11 years. He did not stop easily. But he stopped. The boy was standing in the shadow of the cedar hedge that ran along the south side of the driveway, pressed close to the boxwood the way children press themselves against things when they have been waiting somewhere they technically shouldn't be. His name was Ezra Dawes. He was 13, the son of Maud Dawes, who had worked as Cormac's groundskeeper for 4 years. Cormac had seen him around the property on Saturdays when Maud brought him along, a quiet boy. Thinner than you'd expect for his age, with eyes that always looked like they were reading something just past the surface of things. "What did you say?" Cormac asked. "Don't get in the car." Ezra's voice did not rise. He was looking past Cormac toward the Blacktown car idling at the far end of the driveway, its engine running smooth and low. "Something is wrong with the driver." Cormac turned and looked at the car. It was the right model, the right color, the right plate, as near as he could tell from this distance. The man standing beside the rear passenger door was the right height, the right build, wearing the dark charcoal jacket that the car service required its drivers to wear. Nothing about the scene looked out of place. Cormac had taken this same car to the same office 5 days a week for 3 years. He had learned to stop seeing it. "His name is Darnell," Cormac said. "He's worked for me 3 years. I know what he looks like." "I know," Ezra said. "I know what he looks like, too. I watch him pull up every morning from the garden." He hesitated for just a moment, looked at his shoes, then back up. "Sir, Darnell has a silver crucifix hanging from his rearview mirror. It was his mother's. I've seen it every morning for 2 years. It catches the light when he pulls through the gate." Cormac said nothing. "The mirror is empty," Ezra said. Cormac looked at the car again. From where he stood, the rearview mirror was a small, dark rectangle behind the windshield. He could not see it clearly at this distance. But something in the boy's voice, not urgency, not drama, just the flat, undecorated certainty of someone reporting a fact, made him look one more time, carefully. The mirror was bare. He kept his face still. He had spent 20 years as a federal judge before moving to the private sector, and he had learned in those years that the most important moments in a man's life are often the ones where his face must hold steady while his mind rewrites everything behind it. "Tell me everything," he said quietly. "Walk with me toward the garage. Slowly, don't look at the car." They stood between Cormac's old station wagon and a workbench stacked with clay pots and rusted trowels. The garage smelled of gasoline and cut grass and the particular damp of a space that is used for storage and almost nothing else. Cormac had not been inside it in months. Ezra told him in a voice steadier than it had any right to be. The night before, near 11 o'clock, he had come down to the pool house at the far end of the rear lawn to retrieve a library book he had left there during the day. The lights had been on inside. He had heard voices before he reached the door, coming through the screen of crepe myrtle along the path. He recognized one of the voices immediately. It was Georgina's, his wife's, low and careful, the way people speak when they believe the night has swallowed the sound. The other voice was a man's. Ezra had heard it before, twice, when the man had visited the house over the past 3 weeks under the name Cole Barrett, whom Georgina had introduced as a financial consultant reviewing the household trust. "What did they say?" Cormac asked. Ezra reached into the front pocket of his hoodie and pulled out a small black device, rectangular, worn smooth at the corners. A voice recorder. The old kind, the kind that radio journalists had carried 2 decades ago, with a cracked speaker grill and a red record light that still worked. "My dad left it," Ezra said. "He was a journalist. He died when I was 8. He held the recorder out. I pressed a record when I heard them talking. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't think my mom would believe me. I thought if I didn't have something to show, then nobody would believe me later when it mattered." Cormac took the recorder the way you take something you are not sure you want but know you cannot put down. He pressed play. The first sounds were wind, and then the soft clatter of something being set on a glass table, and then Georgina's voice came through the small speaker, close and clear. "We don't need to change anything before Thursday. He never varies. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 8:15, out the driveway. The car will be there." A man's voice then, unhurried, precise in the way of someone reading from a list they have already memorized. "And the driver?" "I called the service myself. I told them Darnell had a family emergency. They said they'd send someone else. He won't notice until he's already inside." Then the man again, Route 7, past the Briarwood exit. There's a pull-off on the left that nobody uses. It's a quarter-mile from the bridge. The guardrail there is older. They've flagged it for maintenance twice. Nothing's been done. A pause, the sound of ice shifting in a glass. Georgina, when does the transfer process? The power of attorney files the same morning. Graham will see it. But by then, it's already recorded with the county. The firm's shares move into the joint account by noon. And afterward, how long? A year. Maybe longer. We don't see each other in public. We say nothing. We change nothing. The hardest part of this kind of patience is convincing yourself it's necessary. But it is. Cormac stopped the playback. He did not move for a long moment. He looked at the clay pots on the workbench. He looked at a paper wasp nest from 2 summers ago, still hanging in the garage corner, empty and gray. He had built an entire career on evidence. He had heard 1,000 recordings in courtrooms and conference rooms and depositions. He knew the difference between a voice that had been altered and one that had not, between a recording made carelessly and one made with cold intent. The voice on that recording was his wife's. It was as certain as anything he had heard in 30 years of law. He looked at Ezra, who was watching him with the patient expression of a boy who had been waiting all night to be believed. "You did the right thing," Cormac said quietly. "I need you to put that back in your pocket and not show it to anyone. Not your mother, not a friend. No one. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir." "Good." He stood up and adjusted his jacket. "Go back to your mother. Tell her your stomach hurts. Stay in the cottage until I come find you." Ezra nodded once and walked out without another word. Cormac listened to his footsteps fade across the gravel. Then he took out his own phone and dialed Graham Wicks. Graham had been Cormac's attorney for 22 years, through 2 business restructurings, a judicial confirmation, and the kind of contract negotiations that never appeared in press releases. He answered on the second ring. What was unusual was that Cormac did not speak with the comfortable ease of a man calling a friend. He spoke in the flat, clipped register that Graham had heard from him exactly twice before, once the morning of the appellate case that everyone said was unwinnable, and once the night Cormac's first wife was diagnosed. "Graham, I need you to find out everything there is about a man calling himself Cole Barrett, wealth management consultant. He has been to my house 3 times in the past month. I need his real name, his real background, and I need it before noon. I also need you to pull any power of attorney documentation filed or pending against my accounts at the firm." A pause. "I'm not going to ask you why," Graham said. "Not yet." "All right. Where are you going?" "Somewhere that's not my house and not my office. Coffee shop on 19th and Bancroft, 40 minutes. Before leaving the garage, Cormac made one more call. He dialed Darnell Reed. The phone rang 4 times. Then Darnell's voice came through, slightly hoarse, the way a man sounds when he has been home all day expecting nothing. "Mr. Pruitt, is something wrong?" "Darnell, are you at home?" "Yes, sir. Got a message yesterday that you didn't need me this week. Said the firm was handling transportation directly. I thought it was a little odd, but it came through the dispatch system, so—" "That message did not come from the dispatcher," Cormac said. "Stay home today. I'll explain later. One more thing. Your crucifix, the one your mother left you. It's on the mirror?" "Always has been, sir. I never take that down. You know that." "I know," Cormac said. "Thank you, Darnell." He ended the call. The car at the end of the driveway had been waiting 14 minutes now. He could picture the man checking his phone, shifting weight from foot to foot, beginning to wonder why a routine morning had stopped being routine. Cormac walked out through the back of the garage, followed the service path along the side of the house, went out through the groundskeeper's gate onto the side street, and flagged a taxi. Graham was already at the corner table. When Cormac arrived, 2 coffees poured and a leather portfolio open in front of him. He stood briefly when Cormac walked in, the way men who have known each other a long time sometimes do, and then sat back down. "Tell me," he said. Cormac told him. He laid out what Ezra had heard, what the recording contained, what the empty mirror meant, and what the voices had said about Route 7 and the Briarwood guardrail and a power of attorney already moving through the county system like a quiet tide. Graham did not interrupt. He listened with his hands still and his coffee untouched. When Cormac finished, Graham opened the portfolio and set 3 printed pages on the table. "The man calling himself Cole Barrett," he said, "is named Flynn Whitaker, born 1979 in Knoxville. At least 3 documented aliases across 2 states. In 2017, he married a woman named Beverly Crisp in Nashville. She was 61, a retired hospital administrator, widowed, no children. In 2019, she died in a single-car accident on a highway outside Cookeville. The car went off the road at a bend near a river, ruled accidental. He was the sole insurance beneficiary, $2.8 million. He left Tennessee within 6 weeks of the payout. Cormac did not speak. In 2021, Graham continued, a woman in Raleigh filed a protective order against a man matching his description using a different name. The order was granted. He was out of the state before the hearing. There may be others I haven't found yet. How did you find all of this in 40 minutes? I have a researcher who's very fast and never asks why. She found the thread from a shared notary. Whitaker used the same notary public in 2 states for 2 different transactions. That was the crack. Graham closed the portfolio. Cormac. She doesn't know who he really is. Cormac was quiet for a moment. That may be true, he said. It doesn't change what she agreed to. No, it doesn't. He told Graham about Thursday, about Route 7, about the bridge past the Briarwood exit and the guardrail that had been flagged for maintenance twice. He said he wanted to call Detective Verna Hollis, whom he had known since a fraud case 12 years ago, who was thorough and quiet and owed him nothing, and who was precisely because of that the right person to call. Then he said, I have to go back to the house tonight. Graham looked at him steadily. I have to sit at that table and eat dinner, Cormac said, and she has to believe I am exactly who she thinks I am this morning. Because the moment she suspects otherwise, Whitaker disappears, and he has done this before, and he will do it again. Graham was quiet for a long time. Then he said, all right, but you don't walk back in there without someone on that street by 6 o'clock. He went home at 5:45. Georgina was in the kitchen, and she crossed to him the way she always had and touched his arm and said she'd been a little worried because he hadn't texted from the office. He told her the day had been back-to-back and he'd lost track. She nodded and went back to the stove. She was wearing a gold chain he recognized. He had bought it for her 3 summers ago, in Charleston, at a small jeweler's near the market, on a trip she had called the most peaceful week she could remember. He remembered the way she held the chain up in the sunlight outside the shop and said she would never take it off. He sat at the kitchen table and watched her move through the kitchen, and he felt something he had not expected and could not name. It was not rage. He had believed rage was coming, and it had not come. What came instead was something slower and harder to carry, the particular stillness of a man watching a house he has lived in for years, quietly show him all the ways it was never what he thought. Not with anger. Just the steady fact of it. They ate dinner. She poured wine. She asked about a case. He answered with enough detail to sound present. She said something funny about a neighbor. He laughed in the right place. He reached across the table once and covered her hand, and she turned her hand over and held his back, and he let her. After dinner, he said almost as an aside that his Thursday meeting had been rescheduled. Briarwood, same client, same Route 7 drive. He said it while carrying his plate to the sink, his back to her. The pause behind him lasted 2 seconds longer than it should have. Oh, she said, I thought that had fallen through. Turns out they still want the consult. I'll be on Route 7 by 8:30. Well, another pause. Drive carefully on that stretch. You know how the fog sits near the bridge in the mornings. He turned and smiled at her. I always do, he said. Thursday came gray and cold. Cormac came downstairs at 7:15. Georgina had coffee poured. She straightened his collar at the door. She kissed him on the cheek. She said, be safe. He said, I will. The car at the end of the driveway was a black sedan, the same model as always. Darnell Reed stood beside the rear door in his dark jacket, his left hand resting on the handle, the silver crucifix catching the pale morning light from exactly where it always hung. Cormac walked to the car at his usual pace. He looked at Darnell. Darnell gave him the smallest nod. They drove north and then took the highway west toward Briarwood. The morning traffic was thin. After a while, Darnell's eyes moved to the rearview mirror and he said quietly that they had a shadow, dark green pickup. 3 cars back since they left the neighborhood. Cormac looked at his hands in his lap. How many? 2 in the pickup. Gray older model a quarter-mile behind that, joined us just past the county line, and I think there's a 3rd vehicle that's been parked near the Briarwood exit for some time. It was there when I came through on the test drive at 6. Cormac looked out the side window. The trees along the highway were turning, gold and rust at the edges, the way they did every October in Virginia. He thought about Beverly Crisp of Nashville. A woman who had driven a road like this one on a morning like this one and had nobody standing in a driveway to stop her. He took out his phone and called Graham. Graham, he said, tell Detective Hollis to move. They boxed the green pickup at the Briarwood Junction using 2 unmarked sedans. The gray vehicle was blocked a quarter-mile back by a third unit that had come in from a maintenance road off the highway. The car that had been parked near the bridge guardrail, the drop point, was surrounded by county officers who had been waiting in the brush since dawn. Flynn Whitaker was standing beside that car when the officers came out of the tree line. His hands went up before anyone told him to raise them. He had the composed, almost bored expression of a man who had already begun calculating his next move and had not yet understood there was no next move left. He said nothing. He had said variations of this nothing before, in other states, in other mornings, and it had worked twice. It did not work this time. There were no sirens. The whole thing was over in under 4 minutes. Darnell pulled to the shoulder and cut the engine. He sat for a moment with his hands on the wheel, then turned around and looked at Cormac in the back seat. "Is it finished, Mr. Pruitt?" Cormac was already looking at his phone. "Almost," he said, and pressed Graham's number. "Tell Hollis she can send the officers to the house." Georgina did not run. Detective Verna Hollis told him this. When he arrived home an hour later, Darnell, driving slow through the open gate. She was waiting on the front walk with the patient watchfulness of a woman who had spent 18 years delivering news that didn't become easier with practice. "She was in the sitting room," the detective said. "She didn't call anyone. She didn't try to leave. When we came in, she sat very still and looked at us for a long time. Then she said one thing." "What did she say?" She said, "I didn't know who he really was." The detective paused. She said it twice. Then she said, "I should have." Then she asked for a lawyer. Cormac nodded slowly. They brought Georgina out a few minutes later. She walked between two officers with her head level, her hands clasped in front of her, and when she passed Cormac on the front walk, she stopped. Just for a moment. The officers let her. She looked at him. She did not speak, but in that brief stillness, in the way her chin did not quite hold and the way her hand moved slightly, reaching for something that wasn't there, he saw what he had known he would see, and had already decided he did not have the right to take comfort in. She had not known what Flynn Whitaker had done before. That would come out at trial, and it would matter to the sentence. But she had known what she agreed to, and both of those things were true at the same time, occupying the same space inside the same grief, the way two true things sometimes have to. The car door closed. The car moved away down the street and was gone. Cormac stood on the front walk until the block was quiet again. Then he walked around the back of the house to the groundskeeper's cottage. Maud Dawes opened the door before he knocked. She had been watching from the window. She stepped back without a word and let him in. Ezra was at the small kitchen table with a library book open in front of him and a glass of orange juice beside it that had not been touched. He looked up when Cormac came through the door and waited. "Is it done?" Ezra asked. "It is," Cormac said. He pulled out the chair across from the boy and sat down. Maud stood in the hall doorway with her arms folded, watching her son. Cormac set the voice recorder on the table between them. He had been carrying it in his breast pocket since the morning in the garage. "This belongs to you," he said. "Your father's. You should keep it." Ezra looked at it for a moment, then picked it up and held it in both hands. "I kept thinking you wouldn't believe me," he said. "I kept thinking you'd say I had the wrong car or the wrong voice, that I'd gotten it wrong somehow." "You didn't get anything wrong," Cormac said. "The mirror, the voices, the route. You had all of it right." Ezra turned the recorder over in his hands the way people hold things they are not ready to set down. "My dad always said the point of recording something isn't to prove you were right," he said. "It's so the truth doesn't get lonely." Cormac was quiet for a moment. "That," he said, "is a very good way to put it." The case moved faster than anyone expected. Flynn Whitaker was charged in Virginia, and the two prior deaths were referred for reinvestigation. New forensic analysis was ordered on the Tennessee accident. The driver from the green pickup made a deal and named everyone. The audio from a small, cracked voice recorder with a red light that still worked became the cornerstone of the prosecution. Georgina entered a plea. Her attorney argued manipulation and coercion. The record showed 14 months of wire transfers totaling $50,000. The judge was not moved by the coercion argument. Neither was anyone else. Cormac attended the first hearing and not the others. He had decided, in the measured way he made most decisions, that watching something be dismantled did not require witnessing every piece of it come apart. The months that followed, the house changed. Not the way houses change after a death, but the way they change after something that was quietly wrong for a long time finally stops. Cormac moved his mornings to the east-facing sitting room, where the light came in clean and without history. He sold the car he had never liked. He gave Darnell Reed a full-time position with the firm at a salary that Darnell argued about for 10 minutes before accepting. Maud Dawes stayed on. Cormac sat down with her the week after the arrests and asked plainly if she wanted to, and she took one day to think about it and said yes. He arranged for Ezra to transfer to a smaller school on the edge of the city, one with strong programs in journalism and communications. He paid the tuition without calling it a gift. He said it was a reasonable return on a sound investment, and Maud had looked at him for a long moment without speaking, before she thanked him. In the spring, 6 months after the morning behind the cedar hedges, Cormac walked out into the rear garden on a Saturday and found Ezra sitting on the low stone bench near the garden wall. The voice recorder was beside him on the bench. A notebook was open on his knee, pages covered in small, deliberate writing. "What are you working on?" Cormac asked. Ezra looked up. "Writing down things I remember," he said. "My dad kept journals. My mom said he filled about 40 of them." Cormac sat down on the far end of the bench. "There are worse habits," he said. Ezra looked out across the lawn for a moment. The crepe myrtles along the back fence had come into their spring bloom, pale pink against the new green. "Mr. Pruitt," he said, "do you think she knew?" "Mrs. Pruitt, do you think she knew the whole time who he really was?" Cormac considered this with the same care he would have brought to a question from the bench, because the boy was owed a real answer, and not a comfortable one. "I think," he said slowly, "that some people know and choose not to look, and I think that is its own kind of knowing, the kind that is harder to forgive because it came with a choice." Ezra nodded. He picked up the voice recorder and held it the way he always did, settled in both hands, his thumb resting near the red light. "My dad used to say the truth doesn't need you to be brave," he said. "It just needs you to not look away." Cormac looked out at the garden, at the spring light moving through the new leaves, at the way the whole yard seemed different this April than it had in October. Quieter, and somehow more honest, the way places look after they have been through something real and come out the other side of it. "Your father," he said, "was a very wise man." Ezra was quiet for a moment. "I know," he said, "I'm going to try to be." The morning opened around them, warm and unhurried, and neither of them needed to say anything more.